Good morning. A little bit better news from the work that I've been doing. Many of you may know that every 5 years I look at how important is agriculture to the state's economy. And I do that to coincide with the Census of Agriculture, because the Census of Agriculture is kind of our most comprehensive measure of detailed economic data at the sub-state level. There is a full report. There are copies of some of the fact sheets that are out there. So if you Google contribution of agriculture to the Wisconsin economy, it will take you straight to this. Or at least I've Googled it so many times that it goes straight to it. Let me give you kind of the summary here. Agriculture is a $105 billion industry to the state's economy. That's an increase over 5 years ago, which was about an $88 billion. We're seeing an increase in the contribution. Despite all the bad news in terms of what's happening to production agriculture, it is actually growing as part of the state's economy. Depending on how we want to measure, do we want to measure it in terms of jobs? Do we want to measure it in terms of income? Or do we want to measure it in terms of business sales? It's about 11%, 12% of the state's economy. But if we break it down and we kind of look at it in terms of whether or not we're talking about farm production or are we talking about food processing, we get a little bit of a different picture. If we look in terms of on-farm production, we're looking at about between 3 and 4% of the state's economy is coming from on-farm production. That number is a little bit lower, and primarily it's a reflection of the tough times that a lot of farmers are having right now. But if we look at food processing, and when you think about food processing in Wisconsin, the first thing that should come to mind is dairy, is cheese production. But there's a tremendous amount of different types of food processing that's taking place in the state. One of the fastest growing sectors is the bakery industry, for example. If we look here, you're actually seeing that much of the economic contribution of agriculture to the state's economy is coming from the food processing sector. You can also see that there's a lot of tax revenues that's being generated by this. This is state level taxes and local level taxes. Almost $3 billion of revenue is being flowing to state and local governments because of the economic activity generated from agriculture. If we look at dairy, we're known as the dairy state, and dairy is about a little bit less than half of the total contribution. While we still pride ourselves as a dairy state, we do a lot more than simply dairy. We have a lot of specialty crops. Dairy processing, again, is the major contributor here. And looking at that, looking at dairy from both the production side and also the processing side is really, they're kind of two sides of the same coin. So when we think about agriculture in Wisconsin, it's really important that we think a little bit more about the processing side, because it's not so much what came first, was it the dairy farmers or the cheese plants? Who cares? It's an irrelevant question. The thing is that they're joined at the hip, and they really need to kind of work together. And I think that's an important takeaway from this. The key here is that the bulk of the growth in the contribution is coming between 2012 and 2017 is growth in the food processing sector. The other thing is that Wisconsin agriculture is extremely diverse. If you look across the state, you can see that there are some parts of Wisconsin that are highly dependent upon agriculture. For example, the southwestern part of the state, almost 30% of economic activity is related to agriculture. You go into the northern parts of the state, and you would think that that's primarily tourism and forestry. There's still a lot of agricultural activity occurring throughout the state. Indeed, if you look at food processing, what one county has the highest level of food processing in the state of Wisconsin? It's Milwaukee County. So a lot of times when we think of agriculture, we think of it as a rural industry. But really, when we think about food processing, a lot of food processing is actually in urban areas. So agriculture is not just a rural issue, it's a statewide issue, primarily because food processing is so important to the state's economy. Now let me show you here how this has changed over time. This is gross state product. It's adjusted to 2016 dollars. And you can see the blue line is the overall Wisconsin economy. And you can see farming is the kind of orange line and food processing is the gray line. You can see that agriculture, the performance there is not surprising. It's kind of up and down. It's kind of trending a little bit. You can see the farm crisis, the early 1980s. You can see food processing historically has not been growing that much. But what's happened over the last 7 or 8 years? We're actually seeing a tremendous amount of growth within food processing. Consumers' tastes and preferences are changing. We're changing how we buy our food. We're buying our food more from a process component. Now, you can talk about health issues and whatnot, but increasingly, people are not preparing their own meals at home. They're increasingly buying prepared meals, and that is a growth sector for the state of Wisconsin in terms of the agricultural industry. Okay? If we look at, in terms of employment, we get very much the same kind of a picture. The real growth here is in food processing. So what I would like to do is really kind of think about what is driving this growth in food processing and how can that trickle down and create better markets for Wisconsin farmers. We need to broaden our discussion, broaden our thinking about agriculture beyond the farm gate. And in order to give some of the other speakers a little bit more time, I'll wrap it up with that.